Good afternoon. So it is Wednesday, July 3rd, and I hope all of you are getting ready for, just some nice weekend celebrations, whether you celebrate the 4th or are gathering together with family. I have family coming down to hang out, and I really look forward to that. Today, I think I said in my email that I was going to talk about relationship ambivalence, but I also wanted to talk about something else that's just at the top of my mind that I see a lot of people experiencing. And so I'm going to get to that in a minute and talk about that. But before I do that, I want to share with you a few more details about the relationship boot camp that is coming up October 19th and 20th in Annapolis, Maryland. We being me and my co-leader, will be hosting a 2-day workshop. That's a Saturday and a Sunday. And we're all set. We're ready to do it. We're getting the pages together online so that people can register. That hasn't gone live yet, but it will. And so to make sure you're aware of when it goes live, I'm going to put a link in the notes under this video so that you can get on the list so that you're the first to know when it does go live. We are only able to have 24 people attend. We want to keep it intimate. We want to keep it connected. If it gets much bigger than that, then it's too much for the two of us to manage and work directly with everybody. So just so you're aware of that. And we hope to have the registration page actually live at the end of July. It is an educational workshop. It is not therapy, and you do not have to come as a couple. You can come alone. You can bring a friend. You can bring a relative. It's really, and there is a discount for registering as two people, but just know you do not have to be married or for the two people to sign up and get that discount. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that. So hi, Kim. Thank you for joining today here on the call. I never know who's going to show up, if anybody will show up, if I'll be talking to myself. It's all good. And it's really fabulous to see you here. So thank you for jumping on the call. So I'm going to talk today about a trauma that really doesn't get talked about. We all are very familiar with, not only probably in our own experience, but things you see on social media, maybe you have read in books, self-help books, psychology books, articles, things like that. The trauma that has us go to a place of shame, feeling less than, feeling not worthy. And the roots of that are very commonly discussed and talked about. There's the trauma that we don't talk about, which is really the other end of the spectrum when it comes to disconnection from our own sense of self-worth, right? The trauma of disconnection from our sense of self-worth brings us down into shame. But what about the other end of the spectrum? The trauma of what is referred to as false empowerment, which inflates our sense of self-worth, which teaches children and then the behavior as adults that they are above the law, above the rules, that they are not accountable for their own actions, that they are better than others in one way, shape, or form. That is also a relational trauma. And it shows up in ways that I think all of us have experienced. For example, someone who you bring to them, a hurt. When you did X, it really hurt my feelings, and I I need us to talk about it. And the response you get from someone who has been falsely empowered is something like, I didn't do that. What are you talking about? That has nothing to do with me. They may turn it around on you and say, well, if you hadn't done X, Y, or Z, I wouldn't have done that. Or don't bring that up to me. It's not polite to bring that up to me. That's not okay. You can't point out when I've done something to upset you. It's not polite. Or it might look like someone who is constantly late and the response that they get from other people is something like, "Oh, it's okay. We understand. He's always late. She's always late. It doesn't matter. It's okay. It doesn't bother us." Sometimes it can be a parent to a child who's saying something like that. Or, he hits his sister all the time. It's because he has ADD and, he just can't control it. So we understand. It's okay. That's falsely empowering a child. And it teaches them that they don't have to be accountable for their actions and how their actions impact or negatively impact other people. It teaches them that they're above other people. They're better than. It could look something like, "What? That teacher gave you a C on that paper? Ugh, what does she know? She's an idiot." That's falsely empowering a child. And the thing is this, when that is done on a repeat in a repeat pattern over and over again, it may come from a place where the parent is trying to spare the child from experiencing negative feelings. But the problem is, we all need to learn how to manage experiencing negative feelings, negative experiences, rather than avoiding them or being excused from them or their behavior being excused from them. And what happens as a child who has experienced that on repeat when they become an adult is they often can't hear when their behavior has negatively impacted someone else. They also can't fathom the idea of somebody else experiencing them in a way that's different from how they see themselves. And it doesn't serve the child. You see, I say that's a relational trauma because our self-esteem, it's really important that we're connected not only to our sense of worth, that we're not less than anybody else, but also that we are equal to others rather than above others, and that we are fallible human beings who make mistakes, who do, intentionally or not, cause injury, harm, upset to other people, and how to handle that, what to do when we do that to be accountable for that. So instead of helping them learn to face their humanity, when a child is falsely empowered, it sets them up to harm and hurt other people without taking accountability for it. And what makes it so difficult in adult relationships is that the person who's been falsely empowered, is not in pain. They are not hurting. It feels good to view yourself, experience yourself as above other people or above the rules. But the problem is everyone around them is in pain and they're not able to hear it and take accountability for it. So I'm bringing this to you because I think it's really important that we talk about this other end of the spectrum. There's a lot of attention given to the shame end of the spectrum, but not this end of the spectrum. But I see it in my office all the time. I see it in my office when one person in a couple is trying to bring to the attention of the other person how much pain they're in, and the other person can't hear it, won't hear it, dismisses it, and we need to tackle it head on. We need to be able to say it for what it is and face it together. Help people face it together. And that's not an easy task. So let me pause for a second, Kim, since you're here, and get any thoughts or input or experiences that you feel like sharing. There's no pressure. You don't have to. It's totally up to you.
I think you have definitely a valid point, and that does happen. I can't think of any specific examples right off the top of my head, but yeah, I can absolutely relate to what you're saying.
And you think of, and remember, it doesn't have to be within like intimate partner relationships. We
Mhm.
experience this with coworkers,
Mhm.
with bosses, with just interactions with someone, a stranger, where you can bring to someone's attention that something was harmful or hurtful and their lack of willingness to address it, face it, acknowledge it, take responsibility for it. We see it at every level in every situation or system, right? It's not just obviously in intimate partner relationships.
Mhm.
And it can really cause a lot of havoc and pain in relationships. So that's what I wanted to bring to everyone today to have a bit of discussion about. When I think of some examples myself, I experienced it on a really big systemic level. I won't go into all the details. It was a work situation that I was in, a volunteer situation where something happened that was a breach of my safety and boundaries. Again, I'm not going to go into the details, they don't matter. And the organization that was supposed to be protecting me denied any accountability or responsibility for protecting me. It's a little bit of a unique situation, but systems get falsely empowered at all different levels. But if I bring it down to a more granular kind of interpersonal situation, it can happen in friendships. And I'm not talking about where one time someone says, I didn't do that, or I didn't say that, or because I've said that myself. I've done that myself. I'm talking about a repeat pattern of a lack of accountability. That's really important. All of us have bad days. All of us have times when we get defensive, but the ability to come around from that defensiveness and say, I see how that hurt you, and I'm sorry. What can I do to make it up to you?
And even if it is a one-time thing, it's not, maybe that's not what I intended, or whoever intended. That's not the way they intended it to come across, but it's how the other person perceived what was said or done or whatever,
Yeah,
um, that can cause the hurt and distrust
exactly.
and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. To know if you're looking at something where someone is what I'm calling falsely empowered is to look for the pattern, right? Rather than a one-off or an occasional kind of situation like that. If normally they're really, accountable, careful about how they interact with you and so on, you're not looking at somebody who's false empowered. It's really a pattern of behavior that's important. So when it comes to dealing with someone who behaves that way, the most important thing is to continue to speak up and to stand firm in your reality, in your experience, and to not be swayed by their lack of accountability, which is not an easy thing to do. It may look like putting some boundaries up for yourself or consequences on what you choose to do, like with what you choose to do when they behave that way. You know, when I bring up a hurt to you and you dismiss it and deny it and say it never happened, I'm not willing to sit across the dinner table from you each night until you will actually take some accountability for your actions. So I'm not going to have dinner with you each night until this is addressed. We often think of setting consequences as the only option we have is the nuclear option of leaving a relationship, and that's not the case. There are a lot of other ways that we can make it clear I will do X in response to you doing Y. And having the skills to do that is not easy. It's not something that we're taught to do well in our culture or in our families, but it is a necessary skill that is helpful to build that muscle. So,
And
Kim,
here's
let me check
what
in with you again.
I was
Yeah.
just going to ask, and this is kind of the polar opposite of what I just said, but I don't know how to phrase this correctly. There are people that are a lot more sensitive than others. So what do you do with the person who everything you say bothers them, hurts their feelings? I mean, you've got to kind of balance that a little bit too, I guess.
Well, you see, that's a tricky issue because if you are saying something in a kind yet assertive way, and those two things can go together, kind and assertive, their sensitivity and hurt is not yours to manage. It's theirs to manage. And we often get stymied by and look for ways to do it softer, to do it kinder, to be nicer, so that they don't behave in such a sensitive way, get so easily hurt. But some of that is completely out of our control. That no matter how we say it or how we don't say it, they're still going to be sensitive. That's theirs to manage. This connects to discussions and I think a video, a previous conversation that is on my channel about boundaries. Those are emotional boundaries for them to manage. When you know within your own sense of integrity and behavior and how you said and what you did, that it was kind but firm, loving but firm, how they receive it is out of your hands. What's it like to hear that?
I could see that being a very slippery slope, kind of, because it's kind of, I'm kind of talking about both ends of the issue here. But if somebody is so sensitive to pretty much everything I say to them, yes, it is theirs to manage, but that doesn't give me the right to feel that empowered over them, or I don't know.
Say a little bit more what you mean about giving you the right to feel more empowered over them. I'm not sure I'm following you.
Like I have to, if I'm the one, the empowered person,
The falsely empowered person?
false, yes, excuse me, falsely
Oh,
empowered.
okay.
I can't just say, Risa, you're super sensitive. Everything I say, offends you, and just kind of dismiss them. You kind of have to look at it from both ends, I guess, because I have to watch, as the falsely empowered person, I have to watch what I'm saying, because you may be the one that's more sensitive, but the more sensitive person has to realize that perhaps they're interpreting things that I'm saying not the way I'm intending, and it's hurting their feelings when I don't really intend to. I don't know. That's not making any sense, but
Okay. So let me see if I'm following you. I'll do my best, okay? A falsely empowered person speaking to someone who is sensitive is likely to be very dismissive of their sensitivity,
mm-hmm,
is likely to say some of the things that you just mentioned, right? Because part of their false empowerment is they don't think about how they're saying or doing things impacts the other person, whether the other person's overly sensitive or not. So it's we'll say the sensitive person who can strengthen their muscle to say, whether you think I'm being overly sensitive or not, this hurt, and
mm-hmm,
I need you to address it if I'm going to continue to interact with you. That's what I mean about having the strengthening that muscle of being lovingly assertive.
mm-hmm.
When it's someone you care about, right? I'm
Right,
assuming that these two people care about each other,
right.
right? They're in a marriage, they're in a relationship, or something. Rather than allowing and absorbing the dismissal that the other person is sending to them as, oh, they must be right. Oh, I am really sensitive. It does really hurt my feelings. I should just take on more. I shouldn't let it bother me so much, which we do. We tend to do that when we get pushback, right? Pushback from the other person. But when we have a strong, centered sense of our own self-worth and our own boundaries, we can hold both truths. Yes, I know of myself that I can be sensitive, and I know this hurt me, and I know I need you to address it. I'm asking you to address it. You can choose not to, but I won't be dismissed. Now, is the other person going to like that? Is a falsely empowered person going to like that? Not so much. And it's not our job to convince them to like it, plead with them, but it does help when we can stand our ground and set the consequences, set our boundaries. It's not a punishment, it's about self-worth. It's about relational worth. I'm not willing to engage in a relationship where I'm being dismissed. And if you want me to be warm and loving to you and have dinner with you each night, I need you to address how you doing X impacted me.
Mhm. And hopefully, the falsely empowered person will take that to heart and try to do better. It might
Yeah,
not happen the first time, but if it happens a few times, hopefully that will get addressed.
yeah, yeah. And that is the hope, but it's
Mhm.
data, right? It's data.
Right.
Like we find out more and more. Is there a response when I an appropriate change when I stand firm, lovingly in asserting this, or is there not? Or sometimes there is and sometimes there's not. And then we make our choices about what we're willing to continue with and what we're not. It's not easy. None of this is easy. But the pain from not speaking up is devastating and just as painful as it is hard at times to speak up. Any more thoughts about that you have, Kim?
No, I don't think so.
So, in light of the holiday, and this is what I have to share for today, I think we'll call it here. All right.
Okay, that sounds good.
And have a great fourth.